where are the fathers?
It's a huge question.
It sounds so simple, doesn't it? Almost logistical. Did they pop out to the store? Are they stuck in traffic on the M25?
Yeah, where have they gone?
But when you really ask it, when you ask it with the sort of the weight of a generation behind it, it becomes something much, much heavier.
It becomes a question about absence, about a void.
And about what happens to a society when one of its fundamental pillars just, well, it isn't there.
It really is the question that haunts the periphery of so many of our modern conversations. We talk about crime statistics, we talk about the mental health crisis in young men, we talk about the quote-unquote crisis of masculinity.
Right.
But we so rarely trace those fault lines back to that one specific epicenter, the missing father.
And it's not just physical absence, is it? I think that's a key distinction we need to make right up front.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And that's certainly part of it, of course. But we're talking about emotional absence, spiritual absence.
The father who is there, he's at the dinner table, he's physically present in the house, but he's a ghost.
That's a powerful image, the ghost father. It's haunting. And today, we're unpacking a source that I think tackles this head on.
We're looking at a transcript from a really fascinating discussion on the Dutch channel De New Wereld. It features the philosopher Ad Verbrugge hosting three men who are deeply, deeply entrenched in what's called mannenwerk, or men's work.
And we've got Jan Roelofs, who's a journalist, Dirk Koops, who comes from a very strict evangelical background, and then Sven Beijers, a musician and a harbor worker.
A diverse group, to say the least.
Incredibly diverse. You couldn't pick three more different paths in life.
No. You've got the intellectual journalist, the religious exile, and the guy who literally worked as a fitter in the Antwerp harbor. And yet all of them are converging on this one single mission.
The heart of men.
Exactly. And I think we should probably clarify at the top what this mission is really about.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because when people hear men's movement or men's work, the modern brain, it immediately jumps to certain conclusions, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You think of political posturing or maybe the endless debates about toxic masculinity.
Or you think about the manosphere. The internet culture where everyone is yelling about being an alpha male.
Right, the Andrew Tate stuff.
Yeah.
That kind of reactionary anger, women belong in the kitchen type of rhetoric.
Precisely. But this source material, it's steering us in a completely different direction. This is not about political rights or complaining about women.
No.
This is about an internal excavation. It's about exploring something called the wild man archetype, a concept that was really popularized by the poet Robert Bly.
It's also about the psychological impact of the father wound and the desperate need for modern rites of initiation.
They talk about something called the vertical line of masculinity. Which
I found to be such a compelling visual. We'll definitely get into that. But before we dive into the philosophy, we have to start where they start.
With the awakening.
With the awakening. Because for Jan Roelofs, one of the guests, this whole journey, it didn't start with a desire to be some tough guy. It started way back in 1992. And it started because he was, for lack of a better term, a nice guy.
The quintessential nice guy. And Jan's background here is, it's absolutely vital for understanding the whole context. He describes himself as being part of the Optie generation.
Right. And for anyone who's not familiar with the Dutch context, Optie is a very prominent feminist magazine.
A huge deal. And Jan was raised in an environment that was explicitly women-friendly.
He says he could read every single week about what terrible creatures men were.
Yeah.
Insensitive, blunt, violent, and his reaction basically was, well, I definitely don't want to be that.
So he molds himself into the opposite. He becomes sensitive, he becomes accommodating.
He avoids conflict. He was the man that society at that time was saying it wanted.
But hang on, let's pause there for a second. Because on the surface, that sounds like a success story, doesn't it?
It does.
You have a guy who reads the cultural room. He sees that the old macho way, the emotionally stunted, aggressive 1950s dad is out.
It's done.
Society says, we want sensitive men. We want men who listen.
Yeah.
So Jan does exactly that. He becomes the nice guy.
Yeah.
Why is that a problem? Isn't that what we want?
It's such a great question, and it's the absolute heart of the trap that Jan fell into. The problem isn't being nice.
Okay.
And it's not being sensitive. The problem is the source of that niceness.
Motivation behind it.
Exactly. Jan wasn't being sensitive because he was overflowing with some deep, authentic empathy. He was being sensitive out of fear. He was terrified of being associated with that toxic masculinity.
So he just cut it off.
He basically amputated his own aggression.
Yeah.
He castrated his own personality to fit in.
And the source material makes a really brilliant distinction here. They talk about the difference between being harmless and being good.
Yes.
Jan had become harmless, but a harmless man isn't necessarily a good man.
No, he's often just a feudal man.
Right. And that fear creates a vacuum.
Mm.
Jan describes it as a loss of vitality. He felt like a ghost in his own life.
He was doing everything right by the book, but he felt absolutely nothing inside.
He used the word meaning. He was a journalist, a copywriter, successful on paper.
Had it all, supposedly.
But he felt a total lack of meaning. And then he stumbles upon Robert Bly's book, Iron John, or The Wild Man in the Dutch translation.
And there's this one observation by Bly that just hits him like a freight train.
It's the observation that really defined a generation of men, I think. Bly looked at his audiences, these rooms full of young, educated, sensitive men, and he said, these are lovely, women-friendly men.
What?
But I miss something. I miss vitality.
Vitality. Not aggression, not dominance.
Yeah.
Vitality.
Yeah.
Life force.
Exactly. And Jan realized in that moment that he didn't want to be a brute, but the alternative he had chosen, being harmless, had left him completely lifeless.
He was safe, but he wasn't whole.
And that realization, that shock, it pushed him to do something that absolutely terrified him. He signed up for a Wild Man weekend in 1992.
I love how honest he was about the fear in this discussion. I mean, just try to put yourself in his shoes for a moment.
Yeah.
You're a guy who has spent his entire adult life trying not to be one of those awful men, and now you're driving to some remote location to spend a whole weekend with only men.
He said he was scared to death.
Couldn't get a bite of food down. He just assumed it was going to be terrible aggressive.
He was expecting a room full of the very thing he had spent his life avoiding. He thought it would be a locker room on steroids.
But when he walked through those doors, he didn't find violence.
He found grief.
And that brings us right to the second section of our deep dive, the father wound. Because that weekend, it wasn't about beating your chest or hazing each other. It was about facing what was missing.
It's the central theme. It's the thread that binds all of these different stories together, the father wound.
So Jan describes this exercise they did, a father-son circle.
And in that circle, he was just hit with the realization of how intensely he had missed his father during puberty. Specifically, he mentions those critical ages of 12, 13, 14.
Why that age? Why is that so specific, 12 to 14?
Well, it's the threshold of adolescence, isn't it? There's the moment a boy starts to look away from the mother, from the maternal world.
And he looks toward the father.
He looks to the father for the blueprint. How do I be a man? How does a man handle conflict? How does a man handle his own emotions? Does a man just move in the world?
And for Jan, right at that critical moment, that connection just wasn't there.
He says it wasn't just anger he felt, it was pain, it was grief.
And the real shock for him, the thing that totally blew his mind, was ending up crying in the arms of another man.
For a guy raised in the 90s, a journalist who prided himself on being rational and composed, that must have been earth-shattering.
A complete shattering of the persona he'd built up. But it was also the beginning of healing.
And what's so beautiful about Jan's story is a tangible outcome. It wasn't just, having a cathartic cry and then going home.
No, it led to real action.
He wrote a letter to his father. He explained the experience and he told him, I realize I still love you.
And he says that for the last 15 years of his father's life, they had a genuinely good relationship because of that weekend.
That's the power of it. It's not just about sitting in a circle feeling sad. It's about clearing out the emotional blockage so you can actually relate to the men in your life.
But Jan's experience, that's just one angle. We also have Dirk Koops, who comes from a totally different world.
A completely different universe. The strict evangelical reformed background.
And Dirk's perspective adds this whole other layer of cultural and religious suppression to the mix.
In his community, he says, sensitivity in a boy was not seen as a virtue at all. It was seen as a weakness.
He mentions his sensitivity was dismissed as old womanish.
Old womanish? I mean, can you imagine a more damaging thing to tell a young boy?
It's basically telling him that his core personality, his very nature, is wrong.
Exactly. And Dirk brings up this story from Robert Bly, a metaphor called the rat and the bell. We have to unpack this because it's such a weird, powerful image that really, really stuck with me.
Yeah, I read this part of the transcript 3 times. It's dark.
It is a brutal image, but it's incredibly effective.
Mm-hmm.
The story goes something like this. A father takes his son hunting.
Okay.
The son fails to catch anything. The father, however, catches a rat. He hands the dead rat to the son and says, now you go hunt.
Right. And the son, of course, is disgusted by this dead rat and just throws it away.
He spends the whole day hunting, catches nothing. When he gets back, the father asks, what did you catch? The son says nothing.
Then the father asks, where is the rat?
And the son admits he threw it away. And in response, the father takes a bell, a heavy metal bell, and strikes the son with the flat side of it,
Knocking him unconscious.
Whoa. Okay, so obviously this isn't literal parenting advice. It feels like something out of a Grimm's fairy tale. What on earth does it mean?
Dirk's interpretation is that this is the blow that every man receives. Every man knows the moment he received the blow from the bell from his father.
So it's a metaphor for rejection?
It's more than just rejection. It's silencing. It's the moment the father or the father figure says, you are not doing it right. You are not the man I expect you to be.
And psychologically, that part of the son is knocked unconscious. It goes into a coma.
So for Dirk, the bell was his religious community rejecting his emotional world, calling him old womanish. That part of him just went to sleep.
Precisely. The rat represents the gritty, unpleasant, or difficult parts of life that the father is supposed to hand down. Here, hold this. Deal with this.
And when the son rejects it or fails to live up to the expectation,
The bell comes down, and the boy learns a crucial lesson for survival. To be safe, I must kill this part of myself.
man, that is heavy. And then you have Sven.
Sven's story is the polar opposite of the nice guy or the religious boy.
Completely. Sven was raised primarily by a spiritual mother. His father was absent, described as narcissistic. So Sven grew up surrounded by feminine energy, spiritual philosophy, talking about feelings.
Which you would think, based on our modern standards, is the ideal, right? He should be the most emotionally healthy guy in the room. You had all the soft skills.
And yet he felt a massive void. He felt he was missing the hardness of life.
So where did he go to find it? He didn't go to a library.
No, she went to the Antwerp harbor. He became a fitter, working on these huge ships. He threw himself into the rawest, hardest, most stereotypically male environment he could find.
It's a fascinating overcorrection.
Yeah.
He talks about having panic attacks before work because it was so terrifying for him.
But he did it anyway.
Yeah.
He saw it as an unconscious initiation. He needed to touch the hard side of manhood because he felt like he had been drowning in the soft side his whole life.
And this is the generational cycle the guests identify, isn't it?
It is. If a father isn't initiated into his own emotional world, if he hasn't integrated his own wild man, he cannot initiate his son.
He leaves a hole.
And the son then spends the rest of his life trying to fill that hole. Jan tried to fill it by being a nice guy. Sven tried to fill it by working in a harbor. But the hole remains until you address the wound itself.
Which brings us to the philosophy behind all their work. They use a lot of terminology that might sound a bit esoteric.
A bit out there, yeah.
Yeah.
Chakras, archetypes.
But it actually maps out really clearly. And the central concept, the first thing you have to get your head around, is the difference between the wild man and the barbarian.
This distinction is so critical because I think this is where most people get off the bus.
Oh, absolutely.
You hear wild man and you think of the guy painting his face and screaming at a football match, or Vikings burning villages, or a hooligan smashing shop windows.
That is not the wild man. That is the barbarian. And the guests are very, very clear on this. The barbarian acts out.
He projects his pain outwards.
He destroys. He is chaotic. The wild man, by contrast, goes inward.
Inward. How so?
The wild man is connected to nature, to intuition, to the ground beneath his feet. He is grounded, not chaotic. He has immense power, but he doesn't use it to destroy. He uses it to revitalize.
So, like, the difference between a forest fire that just destroys indiscriminately?
In a controlled burn, the kind that clears out the dead undergrowth and allows new life to sprout. The barbarian is the forest fire. The wild man is the deep heat of the earth that makes seeds grow.
That's a great analogy. They use a model by a guy named Ton Kroon to explain this, which connects 7 archetypes. They talk about a vertical line and a horizontal line. I want to break this down because the visual really helped me.
Okay, so to understand this, I want you to literally visualize a cross, like a coordinate system, an X and Y axis. Let's look at the vertical line first. This is your anchor. Think of it like a tree.
Okay, I'm picturing a tree.
The roots of that tree go deep down into the earth, into the mud. That is the wild man archetype.
That's the base.
It's the first chakra, if you want to use that language. It's your survival instinct, your gut feeling, your ability to stand your ground physically. It's dirty, it's raw, it's essential.
And the top of the tree, the branches.
The branches are reaching for the sun. That is the Holy One or the sage. That's your ethics, your spirituality, your ability to see the big picture. Now, here's the key insight from the transcript. A man needs tension on this line.
Tension.
Yes. If you are all branches and no roots, all Holy One and no wild man, what happens when a storm comes?
You blow right over. You're that guy who's spiritual and talks a big game about peace and love, but can't hold down a job or defend his family when it really matters.
Exactly. You are completely ungrounded. But what if you're all roots and no branches?
Then you're just a stump or a brute. You're stuck in the mud. You've got all this raw power, but no direction, no ethics.
Precisely. The heart of men philosophy is about stretching that vertical line. It's about being able to touch the mud and the sky at the same time. That is where real power, real authority comes from. That is the vertical line.
Okay, so that's the anchor, the up and down. What about the horizontal line, the side to side?
The horizontal line represents how you interact with the world and with other people. This is where the other 5 archetypes live.
Okay.
You have the lover. That's your passion, your connection. The warrior, your action, your boundaries, your ability to get things done.
This drive.
The drive. Then, right at the center, at the heart, you have the king. The king provides leadership, compassion, order. Then at the throat, you have the fool or the gesture expression, humor, not taking yourself too seriously.
And finally, at the third eye.
The magician. Insight, strategy, overview.
And the goal isn't to pick one of these, right? It's not like a personality test where you go, oh, I'm a warrior and you're a lover.
No, not at all. The goal is integration. Ideally, all 7 archetypes are working together in a healthy balance. But what they find in their retreats is that most men have some that are overdeveloped and others that are completely withered.
You might have a man who's a fantastic magician, a brilliant strategist, amazing at his job, but his lover is completely dead.
Right. He can solve any problem at work, but he has 0 connection with his wife or kids.
Or a man who is all warrior, always fighting, always grinding, always pushing, but he has no king to guide that aggression. So he just burns himself out and burns out everyone around him.
Exactly. And that brings us to the how. How do you fix a withered archetype? You can't just read a book about it.
No.
You can't just sit there and say, I will now be more king-like. You have to experience it. And that is why they run these retreats. This brings us to the next section of our discussion, the retreat experience itself.
They call it a reconstructed initiation because, let's be honest, our modern society doesn't really have rites of passage anymore.
Not really.
We have.
Sure.
What, like your driver's license?
Yeah.
Maybe your first legal beer.
Well, those are milestones, sure, but they aren't rituals. A ritual requires a container. It requires a descent.
And the guests describe their 3-day retreat in the Ardennes forest as having a very specific classical structure. It follows the hero's journey, separation, the alchemical vessel, and the return.
Let's walk through this separation first. It starts with the drive.
Yeah. Leaving the Netherlands, driving south to the Ardennes, the landscape literally changes.
You're leaving your wife, your kids, your job, your email inbox.
Yeah.
You are physically removing yourself from your daily persona. You arrive in the forest. That is the first step. You are no longer the accountant or the dad. You are just a man in the woods.
And then they enter the alchemical vessel. Now, I have to stop you there.
Okay.
The alchemical vessel. We're getting into some pretty heavy Dungeons and Dragons territory here. I can hear some of our listeners rolling their eyes.
Sure.
Are we talking about guys sitting around a campfire wearing robes and chanting? What does this actually look like in reality?
It's a fair skepticism.
Right.
And honestly, if you walked in on it without any context, it might look a bit strange.
Yeah.
But let's strip away the fancy name. Think of it as a pressure cooker.
A pressure cooker. Okay, I can work with that.
In your daily life, you have all these release valves. You look at your phone, you have a beer, you watch TV, you make a joke to deflect any real tension. The vessel is just a fancy way of saying, for the next 48 hours, we are sealing the lid.
No phones.
No jokes, no deflection. We're going to stay in this room together until the truth comes out.
That sounds absolutely miserable.
It's terrifying. Jan, the journalist, said he was literally shaking. But that pressure is necessary. You can't cook a tough cut of meat or tough emotional trauma in a lukewarm bath. You need the heat.
The guests also mentioned that Dutch men specifically really need this because they live so much in their heads.
Oh, yes. The famous polar model of consensus and rationality. Dutch men are very verbal. They're great talkers.
So if you sit them in a chair and say, tell me your trauma.
They will analyze their trauma for you.
Yeah.
They'll give you a perfect, witty, intellectual dissertation on exactly why they are sad. They will not feel a single thing.
So how do they get them out of their heads and into their bodies?
Movement and sound. They start with physical movement. They make primordial sounds, grunting, shouting, musical sounds.
You can't be in your intellect when you are roaring like a bear or drumming a rhythm.
Impossible.
Yeah.
It forces a descent from the prefrontal cortex right down into the gut, into the body.
They also talk about the importance of vertigen, of slowing down.
Yes, Dirk mentioned how when he first met the Belgian men in the program, they annoyed him so much because they were so slow.
He was fast, verbal, witty.
And they would just pause.
Mm-hmm.
And that speed, that wit, it's a defense mechanism. If I keep talking fast, if I keep moving, I don't have to feel the pain that's lurking underneath.
Slowing down is terrifying because that's when the ghosts catch up to you.
And the retreat forces that deceleration so the ghosts can catch up to you and you can finally turn around and face them.
And then after the pressure cooker, after the vessel, comes the return. Bly apparently had a warning about this. Don't stay in the vessel for too long.
Right. You can't live in the pressure cooker forever. If you stay in that ritual space, you become a hard-baked potsherd, as Bly called it. Brittle. You become that guy who only wants to talk about his feelings and can't function in the real world. You have to step out. You have to integrate the experience back into your daily life.
The goal isn't to live in the woods forever.
The goal is to bring the wild man back to the city, to bring the king back to your family.
Now, this isn't just about individual men feeling better. This is where it gets really, really interesting. Because in Section 5 of our deep dive, we look at the cultural analysis. They apply this archetype model to world leaders. Specifically, they analyze Donald Trump.
And regardless of your politics, the archetypal analysis is fascinating. They diagnose Trump as a king without a heart.
A king without a heart. Okay, let's unpack that. What does that mean?
Well, they argue that Trump possesses several of the horizontal archetypes in abundance. He clearly has the magician. He is a master of media and manipulation.
Yeah.
He has the warrior. He has an undeniable fighting spirit. He has the fool. He's an entertainer, a showman, and he has the lover. He has passion, even if it's often self-directed. But what's missing?
The vertical line.
The vertical line, the connection to the deeper wild man, the grounded, nature-connected self, not just the raw ego, and the higher holy one, the spiritual, ethical overview.
So without that vertical anchor, the king becomes a tyrant.
It becomes all about the ego. It becomes what they call Macht, which is power over, instead of Kraft, which is inner power.
And they say he acts as a mirror to our society. That we have become a society that is heartless and indifferent to suffering, whether it's in Gaza or Sudan, because we as a culture lack that vertical connection.
And this vacuum, this lack of healthy kings, creates a massive problem for young men.
It creates a huge void.
Young men crave the wild man energy. It is biological, it is spiritual, it's a real need. If the mainstream culture says, no, that energy is toxic, sit down, be quiet, be a nice guy.
The energy doesn't just disappear.
It finds another outlet. It has to go somewhere.
Enter Andrew Tate.
Exactly. Andrew Tate, or strict religious dogma, or extremist political movements. These figures rush in to fill the void. They offer a version of the wild man, but it's often the distorted version.
It's the barbarian masquerading as the wild man.
Yes, it offers power, but it offers it through domination and material wealth, not through grounding and interconnection.
And the guests argue that simply dismissing all masculine aggression as toxic is a huge mistake. It's this woke versus anti-woke binary, and they're trying to step out of it. They say if you just suppress that energy, it will erupt somewhere else.
And it connects back to the mother influence they discuss. It's a delicate topic, but they argue there is a necessity for a boy to separate from his mother to become a man.
And if that separation doesn't happen consciously...
The mother energy reemerges in society in other forms.
How so? What does that look like?
As the nanny state. The welfare system that treats its citizens like children. Or, on a personal level, the wife who has to take care of her husband because he can't take care of himself.
That's a heavy concept. The idea that if you don't grow up, the government becomes your mom.
Or your partner does. And that kills the polarity in a relationship. If your wife has to be your mother, she cannot be your lover. It just kills the spark.
So we've established that Trump, in their view, represents this king without a heart. A man with immense power, but no grounding. He's all horizontal, no vertical, all ego, no root.
And this actually connects directly to something else Dirk mentioned in the transcript. It's not just our leaders who lack roots, it's our entire environment.
Right. You can't cultivate a wild man if you live in a perfectly manicured cage. And Dirk points out that for modern Dutchmen, and really for most of us in the West, our physical environment has become a cage.
He compares the jungles of Colombia to the Netherlands.
Yeah, the perfectly managed lawns and fields of the Netherlands.
Exactly. And this isn't just about landscaping. Dirk talks about his time in Colombia, where the nature there felt raw, mystical, powerful. You could feel the wild man in the trees. It was dangerous, but it was alive.
And then he compares it to his home in Zeeland. He calls the Dutch landscape robotized.
Robotized, controlled, tamed. Every blade of grass has a purpose. The water is managed. The dikes hold back the sea. And he says this perfectly reflects the Dutch man's attempt to control his inner world. We are terrified of the wild because the wild is unpredictable.
And this brings up the Greek god Pan, the green man.
Yes, Pan is a central figure here. Pan represents the borderland. He isn't in the city, but he isn't in the deep chaos of the wilderness either. He sits right at the edge of the forest.
He's the border between culture and nature.
And the core idea is that this wildness is actually the source of fertility. Without wildness, nature becomes sterile, and the human soul becomes sterile.
Ultimately, the wild man is circular. Nature is circular. Things live, things die, things rot, and then things grow from that rot.
And modern men, we want linear progress. We want a career ladder.
Right.
We want a stock portfolio graph that only goes up and to the right. The wild man reminds us that we are going to die.
And that's the scary part.
That fear of death, that refusal to accept the cycle, is why we suppress the wild man. Because if we let him in, we have to admit we are mortal animals. We have to admit we are not machines that can just keep producing forever.
So we've done the ritual, we've faced the wild man, we've looked at the culture. What is the final outcome? Section 7 looks at brotherhood.
This might be the biggest shift they describe, moving from a mindset of rivalry to one of brotherhood.
Because men are socialized to view other men as competitors, aren't we?
Constantly. Is he richer than me? Is he stronger? Is he smarter? Is his car nicer?
Or enemies.
Or enemies. The retreat dismantles this. When you see a man cry, when you see a man struggle with the exact same father wound you have, you can't maintain the facade of rivalry.
You realize he's just like you.
Sven said the biggest takeaway for him was regaining trust. He had a deep, deep cynicism about other men. He always kept his shield up. The retreat allowed him to finally drop the shield.
And they learn a new way of comforting each other. This is subtle but so important. Often when a man sees another man in pain, his first instinct is to fix it.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, you have a problem. Here's the solution. A, B, and C. Done.
Or to make a joke to diffuse the tension. I do that all the time. If a friend of mine is sad, I'll make a joke because I feel uncomfortable with his sadness.
Exactly. You are managing your own discomfort, not helping him. But in the heart of men's circles, they learn to stand by. They don't fix. They don't coddle. They offer presence.
They witness the pain without trying to make it go away.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It is the hardest skill for men to learn. It is active waiting. It is just being there and saying, I see you and I am not afraid of your pain. That builds a bond that fixing never, ever can.
And this all spills over into parenting. This is the end goal, really, the new father.
Yes. The ultimate goal is to become a father who acts from power, what the Dutch call kracht, rather than force or power over, which is macht.
Kracht versus macht. Let's make sure we get this right.
Macht is, I will make you do this because I am bigger than you. It's the bell hitting the sun. It is force born of insecurity and helplessness.
And Kracht is?
Kracht is, I am standing in my truth. I am grounded, and I am setting a boundary because it is necessary for your well-being.
They use the word gezag for authority. True authority is vertical. It's earned. It's granted by the child because they sense the father is grounded, that he knows himself.
A father who has faced his own shadow, who knows his own wild man, can tell his son, no, you cannot have more screen time. And he can do it without getting angry, without feeling helpless, and without fearing his son's emotional reaction.
He speaks from the belly, not from the head.
And that stops the cycle. That prevents the rat and the bell moment for the next generation because the father isn't knocking the son unconscious out of his own insecurity.
He is present. He is the king in his own home. He initiates his son simply by showing him what a whole integrated man looks like.
We are coming to the end of our deep dive, and honestly, it feels like we've traversed a massive landscape.
That's a lot.
From the nice guy syndrome to the rat and the bell, to the politics of Donald Trump and the forests of the Ardennes. The guests in the transcript are realistic, though. They acknowledge that this movement, while it's been growing for 30 years, is still a drop on a hot plate.
It is. We're talking about decades of work, but against a cultural tidal wave of distraction, fatherlessness, and confusion, it is a small resistance. But they quote Churchill, and I think it's the perfect attitude.
Just keep buggering on.
Just keep buggering on.
I love that.
It's the only option, really. You continue the work of self-discovery despite the headwinds. You keep showing up for the retreats. You keep writing letters to your father. You keep holding space for your sons.
So, for you listening right now, here's the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. We talked about the vertical line, that anchor between the wild man at the root and the holy one at the top. Where is your vertical line right now?
Are you operating entirely on the horizontal plane? Is your life just about the daily grind, the career, the social media feed, the next transaction?
What would happen if you stopped trying to be a good man, socially acceptable, polite, harmless, and instead tried to be a whole man?
What would happen if you invited the wild man to sit at your dinner table? Not to destroy the table, but maybe just to give you the appetite to actually eat the meal.
Consider where you find your own alchemical vessel. It might not be in the Ardennes forest with a group of men. It might be a garage. It might be a run in the rain.
But find that place where you can take off the mask.
Because if you don't, eventually the mask eats the face.
Indeed.
That's it for this deep dive into the heart of men. Thanks for listening.
Until next time.